Hi, third graders. So today we are going to be continuing our practice and our learning with the skill of context clues. Let's get this document camera focused so that you can see. If you were with me last week, we started learning that context clues are a helpful reading skill because we can determine what tricky words are by using our context clues. If this is a new skill for you, I'm just going to review really quickly. Sometimes when we encounter a tricky word, we can use the word or. Sometimes the tricky word will be right next to the word or, and we can use that as a way to figure out what the tricky word means. Sometimes those tricky, unfamiliar words are right next to a comma. And if you find the tricky word next to a comma, usually the word right after the comma can give you a clue what that unfamiliar word is. Sometimes an author will use a tricky word right next to the word called, and that's kind of like a bridge that will connect the unfamiliar word with a word that you do know. So there are 3 context clues that can help you with tricky words. Now, sometimes when you're reading a longer text, perhaps you're reading a paragraph, sometimes the tricky word, the answer to that tricky word or the meaning of that tricky word will be in the sentence before the word. So that means you have to be a very careful reader and go and read the entire paragraph and look at the clues all around the unfamiliar word because the answer might be in the sentence before. So you know what comes next. If there's a possibility of finding the answer in the sentence before, then you know that you might also need to look in the sentence after, because sometimes the author will put the meaning of the tricky word in the sentence after. So we've been practicing a chant. We say these tricks very quickly. So when I say it's time to say the context clue chant, you would say or comma called, sentence before, sentence after. So let's do that together pretty fast. Or comma called, sentence before, sentence after. Good job. Now, if none of those tricks work, you're just going to have to tap into your brain and take out the tricky word and fill in the blank with a word that you think might make sense. And that's where you're going to start using your brain to figure out, I don't know what that word means, but if I use this word, does that make sense? So here are your context clues. Or comma called, sentence before, sentence after, or fill in the blank. Use all of these tricks to help you with tricky words. Now, today we're going to practice with this particular skill. I only want you to concentrate on filling in the blank with a possible answer that you think might make sense. So I'm going to read a book for the very first time. This is a new book for me. I don't know if you've read it or not, but you're going to love it. This is called Baloney. And this book is so much fun to read, but it's really hard to read because it's full of nonsense words. Now, nonsense words are perfect for context clues because we need to figure out what all of the clues are telling us to determine that mystery word. So remember, I told you we're practicing on the skill fill in the blank. So there's a special word in this story. It's called zimulus. I want you to pay attention to the word zimulus. I want you to see if you can figure out what the meaning of the word zimulus is, and then we're going to try to fill in the blank with what we think a zimulus is at the end of the story. Okay, just sit back. You are watching and listening and enjoying this entertaining story titled Baloney. Another name for Baloney is Henry P. Last Tuesday morning at 8:37 a.m., Henry P. Baloney was finally late for class once too often. That's it, said Miss Bugscouple. Permanent, lifelong detention. Unless you have one very good and very believable excuse. Well, I would have been exactly on time, said Henry, but I misplaced my trusty Zimulus. Then I found it on my desky. But someone had put my desky in a taraku. The taraco drove me right here to Skaskola. But, okay, remember, boys and girls, I'm asking you what a zimulus is, and I bet some of you are already putting clues together. Then it drove right past. I grabbed my zimulus and jumped out, but I jumped smack in the middle of a Razoo launch pad. I used my zimulus to pop open the escape porto, but it turned out to be a porto into the next Razoo blasting off. I jammed the Razoo controls with my zimulus so I could land behind Skaskola and still be on time, but I jammed the wrong button and ended up on the planet Astrosis. Okay, so this book is so much fun, but it's kind of hard to read. It has a lot of really difficult words. Remember, we are using our context clues to figure out what the word zimulus means. I entertained the Astro guys with my very funny Picasus, but they decided my Picasus and I would be entertaining to eat. I changed their minds with geodrams and cockulations so fantastic, they crowned me Kaningas of the whole planet. But I forgot the Astrosis word for thank you and accidentally used the word for doof brain. I foiled their plan to disintegrate me by plafugering Blassa with my zimulus. But they made a new plan to send me back in a sighing flosser to fracasse our Skaskola. I erased the sighing flosser fracasse instructions, but I also erased the sighing flosser porto lock and fell out. I dropped like a Yurok. I was only 3 seconds away from Zerplatzen all over the steel plots, but not even my trusty Zimulus could save me. So what did you do? Said Miss Bugscuffle. How could you possibly save yourself? I suddenly remembered that falling bodies obey the law of gravity. And I haven't learned the law of gravity yet, so I stopped and came to Skaskola. All of which made me exactly 7 minutes late this Amu. Henry P. Baloney, said Miss Bugscuffle, that is unbelievable. But today's assignment is to compose a tall tale. So why don't you sit down and get started writing? I'd love to, said Henry, but I seem to have misplaced my Zimulus. Okay, boys and girls, if you know what the Zimulus was, I want you to send me a message in Schoology. You're going to use that little envelope at the top of Schoology in the right-hand corner, and you're going to send me a private message. And you're going to say, Mrs. Stone, I think the Zimulus was a... Let me go back to so that you can see how to spell that word right there. Zimulus. Zimulus. So send me a message just for fun and say, I think the Zimulus was a, and then you fill in the blank. That was a really fun way to practice context clues. Remember, context clues are clues that help us figure out what difficult words mean. Sometimes we can look for the word or. Sometimes we can look for a comma. Sometimes we can look for the word called. Sometimes the answer is in the sentence before. Sometimes the answer is in the sentence after, but today we are going to practice taking the word Zimulus out of the story and filling in the blank with a word that we think it might be. So, context clue masters, send me a message and let me see what you think.